So today we're going to talk about how to remove late payments, especially recent late payments, may they be 30 or 60 days late. And by recent, I mean within the last year or an open account. Now, here's the good part. I'm going to show you proof that this process that I'm going to share with you works. Now, grab a hold of this. This is an actual deletion letter we got from Capital One for removing a client's late payment for the month of July, where they're saying that they're going to remove the late payment from Experian, Equifax, TransUnion, and so forth. Now, how did we get this deletion letter? Now, keep in mind that just simply asking for a Goodwill removal from lenders most of the time will not work unless there is some error that they made at their end. So I'm going to go over this process that I like to call the DSEL method, which is one that I've perfected over 20 years because helping clients out, I've dealt with the credit bureaus, CEOs, the regulatory agencies, even sued lenders, done tons of credit bureau disputes, Goodwill requests, and I've kind of figured out what works, what doesn't work, and I'm going to go over that in this particular problem. Now, what is the DSEL method? By this video, under here, you're going to see a link to my article that I've written on my blog that goes over this in detail, and we're going to kind of go ahead and shadow this article as well too. If you can't find it, Google how to remove 30-day late payments or how to remove late payments IMAX credit repair, and this should come up. Now, as far as the DSEL method goes, it's got 4 steps. Discover, step 1, step 2, strategize and execute, step 3, escalate, step 4, litigate. So step 1 in the discovery process, well, I'm a big fan of not making any assumptions. So what you want to do in step 1 is discover the facts, review the credit report, and call the lender and just play dumb. Find out what happened. What led to this late payment? Often I see with people and my clients, they call the lender assuming one thing, and actually the late payment happened for a different month than they thought or for a different reason. One thing could be is that you could see a late payment reporting to your credit report for December, and you're thinking that I missed a December payment, but in actuality, you didn't make a payment in November and they marked you late for December. So that's important to know. So look at your credit reports, call the lender, and just play dumb and say, hey, what happened? Another scenario could be that they didn't get your full payment, they got partial payment and they marked you late anyways, right? So that means that you didn't miss the payment, but they still marked you late. So these things are important to know. Now, once you kind of like do the discovery, then you want to find out that do any of these particular issues relate to you? Mistakes by the creditor, or did you have any extenuating circumstances? What could mistakes by the creditor be? Well, they tacked on an annual fee and therefore you ended up being late. Or you're locked out of your account access and you're not able to access your account and make a payment. Or they had the wrong spelling of your home address and the statements came back as undeliverable. Or it could be that you made a payment on the phone and the creditor took your wrong bank account information. So these are one of many, many reasons that could be pinned on the creditor. However, you just can't make a claim and say, hey, here's what happened. And so it can't be a fabricated story as such, because they are going to check. They're very, very finicky about removing late payments. If you make a story and you say, hey, I called in to make a payment and you guys didn't process it, well, guess what? They're going to have every phone record and they're going to listen to every call. So first, see if that works. Now, if that's not present, any of these issues around the creditor mistakes, then you could look at, did you have any extenuating circumstances? So what could that mean? Were you hospitalized? Was there a death in the family? Did your bookkeeper forget to make a payment and they were entrusted with doing so? Or you had set up auto payments through your bank and the bank didn't process. Now keep in mind that all these particular extenuating circumstances you will need to provide validated proof for. That's why we call this a validated Goodwill request. You can't say, hey, I was in the hospital, not provide any proof. They're not going to buy that. So all this needs to be documented. Now, keep in mind that if you don't have any of these particular circumstances that apply to you, then you can just call the lender up and say, hey, I just want to see if you'll remove the late payment as a courtesy. If they ask you any more questions, don't tell them much. Just say, hey, I just want to see. 19 times out of 20, they're going to say no. And the only time they're going to say yes is that if they see some error in their system. But anyways, worth a call. Now, another thing is that if you don't see any of these particular things apply to you, then reach out to us. We can look at credit reporting coding errors and see if you have a case which we could possibly take out. And the best thing about our service is we only charge after results. If we don't fix your credit moving forward, if along these lines, if you've made a case and they don't relent, well, I'm getting far ahead of myself. You could use this validated Goodwill letter to incorporate any of these particular reasons. And, and along with this validated Goodwill letter, you want to go ahead and include your bank statement to show that you had sufficient money in your bank account to make the payment. So for instance, let's just say I'm saying I was hospitalized. I get a letter from my doctor that I was hospitalized. Then I also get a copy of my bank statement to show I had enough money to make the payment. Now, if that doesn't work, then you're either going to file a regulatory complaint or send a letter to the CEO's office. One of those two things. I'll file a regulatory complaint if, for instance, the late payment happened due to a lender's error. Then I'm actually complaining. However, if I'm arguing this was an extenuating circumstance, then it's more of a validated Goodwill request where I'm actually asking for a favor, right? They're not supposed to remove the late payment, so I'm kind of being nice, right? So I'm not going to throw them under the bus, because the CFPB will come back and say, well, they haven't done anything wrong, there's no error, so that's why I'm more than likely to go down this particular route. Now, having said that, if they don't end up removing the late payments, then you can do a deep dive and see, are there any legal grounds to take legal action against them? And if that is, then you could look into your local courts or reach out to a professional in the legal field. We basically have done plenty of suits against creditors to remove late payments. And like I said, the best thing about our service is we only charge if we're successful. If we're not successful, you're not billed anything. That's the beautiful thing about the service that we provide here at IMAX Credit. Either way, getting to late payments, how long do they stay on a credit report for? They stay on the credit report for about 7 years. You're going to get about 50% of your points back in about 2 years, and after that, you're kind of like going to inch your way back up to, getting the full amount of points back over the next several years. And 7 years is how long it takes for an item to come off automatically off the credit. So, anyways, without further ado, go ahead, take some action, and if you feel that you don't have any extenuating circumstances or any creditor errors that you can't discover, then reach out to us. Email us at info@imaxcredit.com, reference this YouTube video, any questions that you have, or if you're stuck in the process, we could help out, or just review your case to see what we can take on or not. Hope this video is helpful. See you next time.